There is a moment, and most women have felt it, when you suddenly become aware that you are holding your breath, not because something frightening just happened, but because something quiet did. A memory arrived without permission, a name crossed your mind for no apparent reason. A feeling settled into your chest like fog moving through an open window, slow, uninvited, and impossible to push back out. You looked at your phone. Maybe you didn't even realize you were doing it. And in that small, almost invisible moment, something in you already knew. Someone was thinking about you, not in the casual, passing way that people think about acquaintances or co-workers. Something deeper, something that had weight to it. The kind of thinking that happens at 2 in the morning when the distractions finally run out and a person is left alone with the truest version of themselves. You felt it. And that feeling is exactly why you're here right now. What I want to do today is something different from what you might expect. I'm not going to simply tell you that someone misses you and that everything is going to be fine. That's too easy. And honestly, it doesn't serve you. What I want to do is take you deeper into the psychology of what's actually happening between two people when silence grows between them, when distance stretches out, when emotions pile up beneath the surface like pressure building beneath stone. Because Carl Jung, one of the most profound explorers of the human psyche who ever lived, understood something about love and longing that most of us have never been taught. And once you understand it, you will never look at your relationships or yourself the same way again. So stay with me, because what's unfolding right now in this connection you're thinking about is far more layered than simple longing. It is a psychological event, and it is happening inside both of you. Let's begin with something Jung said that almost nobody talks about in the context of romantic relationships. He said that everything that irritates us about others can lead us to an understanding of ourselves. Think about that for a moment. Not the part about irritation. Think about the deeper architecture of what he was pointing to. The people who affect us most profoundly. The ones whose absence creates an ache we cannot explain. The ones whose name still lands differently than every other name we hear. Those people are not simply outside of us. They have become part of our inner world. They have taken up residence in the psychological space that Jung called the psyche. And once someone lives there, distance doesn't remove them. Time doesn't erase them. Willpower alone cannot evict them. This is not weakness. This is not obsession. This is the architecture of deep human attachment. And it is one of the most misunderstood forces in every woman's emotional life. Now I want you to think about this person, the one who has been occupying your thoughts. Maybe you've been trying not to think about them. Maybe you've been telling yourself that you're past it, that you've moved on, that you don't care anymore the way you once did. And yet, here you are. And here they are. Still somewhere inside the landscape of your mind. That's not a coincidence. That's not weakness on your part. That's evidence of something real. Something that was built between you. Something that the logical mind cannot simply dismantle by deciding to. Because here is what most people get deeply wrong about emotional connections, especially women who have loved carefully, deeply, and often silently. They believe that the connection lives in the communication, in the texts, the calls, the presence, the daily rituals of being known by another person. And so, when the communication stops, they assume the connection stops too. They measure the relationship in messages. They measure love in response times. And when those things disappear, they begin to believe that perhaps what they felt was never as real as it seemed. But Jung would push back on that with everything he had, because he understood that the most significant connections between people don't live in the words they exchange. They live in what he called the unconscious, that vast, invisible interior ocean that exists beneath everything we say, everything we do, everything we consciously choose. The unconscious doesn't operate on logic. It doesn't follow the rules of time or distance or silence. It carries what the conscious mind tries to release. And it holds those things, sometimes for years, with extraordinary fidelity. This is why you can go weeks without consciously thinking about someone and then have a single dream that brings them back with the full emotional force of the very first time. This is why a song, a smell, a specific quality of afternoon light can dissolve every wall you've carefully constructed and return you to a feeling you were certain you had buried. The unconscious does not forget. It archives, and what it has archived about this person is still very much alive. Now let's talk about them. Because something shifted recently. You may have sensed it as a feeling in your body before you had any logical explanation for it. A kind of atmospheric change. Something in the emotional air between you that became charged in a way it hadn't been before. And that's not your imagination. That's not wishful thinking dressed up as intuition. Jung believed, and this was considered radical when he first proposed it, that human beings are not sealed off from each other the way we like to pretend. He developed the concept of the collective unconscious to describe the shared psychological substrate that all human beings participate in. But beyond that broader concept, he observed something even more intimate in the dynamics of close relationships. When two people have created a genuine bond, when they have truly seen each other, truly affected each other, truly left marks on each other's inner world, those people develop what we might call an emotional resonance, a kind of tuning. And when one of them experiences a significant internal shift, the other often feels it. Not through psychic magic, through the deep attunement that meaningful connection creates. This person has been going through something, not something they've necessarily shared with anyone, not something visible from the outside, but internally, in the private country of their inner life, something has been happening. A slow erosion of certainty, a growing awareness of absence. Not just your absence from their daily life, but the specific quality of what your presence once gave them. The way things felt different when you were part of the equation. The way the world had a particular texture when they knew you were in it, that you were reachable, that the connection was intact. And recently, within the last short while, something broke through the wall they had been carefully maintaining. I want to explain what that wall was, because understanding it will change how you see everything that has happened between you. Jung identified one of the most powerful psychological mechanisms in human beings as projection. We take parts of ourselves, particularly the parts we haven't fully examined, the parts that frighten us, the parts that feel too vulnerable or too large or too complicated to sit with, and we place them onto the people closest to us. We fall in love not just with another person, but with what that person activates inside us. The hope they awaken, the version of ourselves we become in their presence. The feelings they unlock that we couldn't access alone. This is why falling in love feels so enormous. Because it is. You are not just encountering another human being, you are encountering lost and undiscovered parts of yourself, being reflected back through the prism of another person's presence. And this is also why losing that connection or creating distance from it hurts in ways that go far beyond simple loneliness. When someone pulls away from a deep connection, they are not just pulling away from you, they are pulling away from the parts of themselves that only came alive in your presence. They are severing themselves from their own awakened depths. And that severance, whether they admit it consciously or not, creates a particular kind of internal suffering. This is what they have been carrying. There is a concept Jung wrote about that is rarely discussed in conversations about love and relationships, but it is perhaps the most important one of all. He called it the shadow. The shadow is not something dark or evil. That's a common misunderstanding. The shadow is simply the collection of everything we have decided not to be. Everything we've pushed into the unconscious because it felt too vulnerable, too frightening, too much. Our unmet needs, our deepest desires, our capacity for genuine intimacy, and what that intimacy costs us. Our terror of being truly known and then truly left. Every person carries a shadow, and in close relationships, the shadow is constantly activated because closeness is threatening. Genuine intimacy requires that we allow ourselves to be seen in ways that feel inherently unsafe. And many people, especially those who carry old wounds from early love, from parents who were inconsistent or unavailable or overwhelming, develop sophisticated defenses against that kind of exposure. Distance becomes a defense. Silence becomes a shield. Pulling away becomes a way of remaining in control when the feelings inside have grown too large to feel manageable. This person has been using distance as a defense, not necessarily against you specifically, though it has certainly felt that way, against themselves, against the depth of what they feel, against the vulnerability that your closeness requires of them, against the terror of needing someone and not being certain that the need will be met. And for a while, the defense worked, or seemed to. The distance created the illusion of safety. The silence created the illusion of control. The busyness and the distractions created the illusion of having moved on. But illusions are fragile, and eventually, always, reality finds a way through. What happened recently was not a small moment. Even if it appeared ordinary from the outside, even if nothing dramatic occurred, even if the circumstances seemed unremarkable, something significant happened in their interior world. The illusion cracked. The defense began failing. And what poured through the crack was not just emotion, it was recognition, the kind of recognition that cannot be unfelt, the kind that arrives once and changes the quality of everything that follows. They recognized, with sudden, almost physical clarity, that what they had been telling themselves was not true, that the distance had not healed them, that the silence had not freed them, that all the time and busyness and effort had not accomplished what they hoped it would. They are not over this. They are not past this. The connection is not something they have successfully left behind. It is still here. It is still alive inside them. And it has been alive every single day that they pretended otherwise. That recognition came with fear. I need you to understand that, because the fear is important. The fear is not evidence that they don't care. The fear is evidence of exactly how much they do. Think about it from the inside. Imagine spending a significant amount of time convincing yourself that you've moved on, organizing your life around that story, building your identity for this period of time around the narrative of someone who has successfully protected themselves from the pain of a difficult connection. And then, in a quiet moment, an unguarded moment, discovering that the entire story was a construction, that beneath it, untouched by all your effort, the feelings remain exactly as they were. What you feel in that moment is not relief, not first. First, you feel a kind of vertigo, because the ground beneath you is different than you thought it was. The map you've been using doesn't match the actual territory of your heart. And if you were wrong about this, if you were wrong about something this significant, what else have you been wrong about? This is the spiral they have been in. This is the weight they are carrying. And here is what I want to say to you directly, because this is the part that most conversations about love and longing miss entirely. The way you have been changing is part of what broke through their defenses. Not because you did anything calculated, not because you performed strength or distance or indifference in order to create a specific reaction, but because growth is real. Because the investment you have been making in yourself, in your own clarity, your own peace, your own understanding of who you are and what you deserve, has produced an actual change in your energy, in the way you occupy space, in the frequency you emit, if we want to use language that matches the felt experience of this. Jung called this process individuation, the gradual, sometimes painful, always profound process of becoming more fully yourself, of integrating the scattered parts of your inner world into a coherent and authentic whole. It is the deepest work a human being can undertake. And when someone begins doing it genuinely, when someone begins moving toward their own wholeness rather than away from their wounds, other people feel it, even at a distance, even across silence. Because something about that person becomes more real, more grounded, more genuinely themselves, and this person has felt that in you. It may have begun as a subtle thing, a sense that your energy was different, that the quality of your presence had shifted, that you were no longer waiting in the same way, needing in the same way, held in place by the connection in the same way. And that shift, which came from you genuinely growing, genuinely healing, genuinely becoming more of who you are, activated something in them that all their distance and silence and effort could not. It activated the fear of genuine loss, not the comfortable theoretical fear of losing something abstract, the real fear, the visceral, landing in the body fear of recognizing that what you had is changing, that the window is not infinite, that the version of you who was available in a particular way may not remain available forever. And with that fear came the beginning of honest reckoning. Jung wrote about this, about the way the soul will force us into crisis before it allows us to remain comfortably unconscious, about the way growth sometimes requires that the old structure collapse before the new one can be built. This person is in a collapse, not a dramatic, visible collapse. Nothing that would appear in the external circumstances of their life. An interior collapse. The collapse of the story they were telling themselves. The collapse of the certainty that distance was wisdom. The collapse of the protection that silence seemed to provide. And as those structures crumble, what remains is the unmediated truth of what they feel. Raw, undefended, impossible to continue denying. They miss you, not as a passing sentiment, not as a comfortable nostalgia, in the way that absence becomes a presence, in the way that the shape of something missing becomes more vivid than many of the things that are actually there, in the way that your voice exists in the silence, your laugh exists in the quiet moments, your particular way of understanding them exists in every conversation with someone who doesn't understand them quite that way. You have been occupying them completely, and they have been exhausted by the effort of pretending otherwise. Now here is where Jung's understanding becomes both the most difficult and the most liberating part of everything I'm sharing with you. Because the question that women most often ask in this situation is, what does this mean for me? What does this mean for us? What should I do? What should I expect? Is this going to resolve in the way I hope it will? And I want to answer that honestly, not with false certainty, not with the comfortable reassurance that everything is going to unfold exactly as you wish, but with the kind of truth that actually serves you, that actually makes you stronger, regardless of how any particular external situation resolves. Jung believed that the purpose of relationships, all relationships, but especially the ones that shake us most profoundly, is not ultimately about the other person. It is about the expansion of the self, about the parts of ourselves that get activated, revealed, challenged, and ultimately integrated through the experience of deep connection and sometimes deep loss. The people who affect us most are almost never simply people. The person who is thinking about you tonight is thinking about you because of who you are, because of the specific, irreducible quality of your presence in their life, because of what you gave them, and what you challenged in them, and what came alive in them when you were part of their daily world. That is real. That is not nothing. That is, in fact, something quite rare. And so is this. This thing that is happening inside you right now, this willingness to feel, to understand, to grow through the experience rather than simply endure it, that is yours. That belongs to you regardless of how any external story resolves. What is happening between you and this person is not finished. Something is moving. Something that had been frozen is beginning to thaw. Something that had been buried beneath effort and silence and the exhausting maintenance of distance is pushing toward the surface. Whether that becomes the specific resolution you're hoping for, or whether it becomes the beginning of something that looks different than you imagined, but gives you exactly what you need. Something true and important is in motion. And you? You are already awake. You already feel it. You already know, somewhere beneath the questions and the wondering and the quiet ache of caring for someone who has been difficult to reach. You already know that you are more than this uncertainty, more than the outcome of this one connection, more than the reflection you see in someone else's eyes. You are the center of your own story. And your story is not dependent on how theirs unfolds. Your becoming is already happening. Your depth is already real. Your worth is not located in whether someone chooses you. It is located in the extraordinary complexity of who you actually are. Feel that. Let it settle. Let it be more real to you than the questions you came in with. Something shifted recently, inside them, inside you, inside the space between you. And whatever comes next, whatever form the resolution takes, you are already the person who is whole enough to receive it, wise enough to navigate it, and strong enough to continue becoming no matter what. That is not a small thing.